Welcome back on this beautiful Tuesday, chilly April morning. Flora.
Ulysses.
Bye.
DiCamillo.
Good job. So today I want you to think about when you do your reading, think about what is the character saying and doing. And add on to that, how are they saying it? How are they doing it? And let's just look at one little example how things might not be as they seem. The name tag on the waitress from this part of the story we read last week was Rita with an exclamation point. Rita, not just Rita. Rita! That was her name. And what happened to Rita? Flora Ulysses. Ulysses jumped into Rita's hair. And there was a lot of screaming and hollering. Do you think while someone is reading this, they should read it like, "Help me," screamed Rita.
Yeah.
And Ulysses thought, "Help me too." No, it would be more like, "Help me."
With expression.
With expression. So girls and boys, when you're reading your stories today, think about how to read them. Not just what you are reading, but how should you read it? You should read it with expression. Do you think you could do that today?
Yeah. We should do Don't Read Like a Robot.
Don't read like a robot. Okay, maybe we will go to Go Noodle.
Don't read. Yeah.
And we'll do Don't Read Like a Robot after we read Flora.
Ulysses
Bye.
by DiCamillo.
Aw, my little people, you are so good. All right, so we read in chapter 30 about Sunny Side Up, about Rita getting a squirrel caught in her hair. I'm afraid that might happen to mine someday.
I know. I'm fine with it because I don't have long hair like you guys.
So, but Rita, she has this huge hair all piled on her head. All right, wholly unanticipated occurrences. Flora watched Ulysses fly over her, his tail extended at full length, as front paws delicately pointed. Delicately is like gentle.
What?
How you guys doing? It was just like her dream. He looked incredibly, undeniably heroic. "Holy bagumba," said Flora, and she climbed on top of the booth so that she had a better view. When the incandisto flew, when he became a brilliant streak of light in the darkness of the world, he was usually headed somewhere to save someone. And Dolores was always flying at his side, offering advice, encouragement, wisdom. Flora wasn't sure exactly. Flora wasn't sure exactly what Ulysses was doing, and it didn't look like he really knew either, but he was flying. Squirrels look like they're flying when they're just jumping. They can coast through the air. "George Buckman," whispered her father, "how do you do?" Flora had forgotten about her father. He was looking up at Ulysses, and he was smiling. It wasn't a sad smile. It was a happy smile. "Pop," said Flora. There was a long, loud scream from Rita. "It was in my hair," she shouted. Someone threw a donut at Ulysses. A baby started to cry. Whee! Flora climbed out of the booth so that she could stand next to her father. She slipped her hand into his. "Wholly unanticipated occurrences," said Flora's father in voice of Dolores's. It had been a long time since Flora had heard her father say those words. "His name is Ulysses," she said to him. Her father looked at her. He raised his eyebrows. "Ulysses," he said. He shook his head and then he laughed. It was a single laugh. And then his laughter became longer. Flora's heart opened up inside her. Do not hope, she said. Do not hope. Remember, she's a cynic. She only expects the basic facts and not anything hopeful. She's thinking there's no such thing of something good to happen. She's had a lot of hard things happen in her life, including her parents' divorce. And then she noticed that the cook was leaping in a twirling, waving motion with his knife and trying to reach the flying squirrel. She looked up at her father. The maleficent must be stopped, right? Right, said her father. And since her father agreed with her, Flora stuck out her foot and tripped the man with the knife.
Okay, that is extremely dangerous.
Seriously, extremely dangerous.
What happened? Oh.
You must have been picturing it in your mind to know that was extremely dangerous. Good work. I love Flora. It was in my hair. Sunny side up. Splat. So chapter 32 is just a comic strip of what just happened. So I guess if you were Ulysses and you were telling the story, that's what you'd say. I flew. Where's Flora? Is that a piece of donut? More comic strips from the perspective of Ulysses. Sprinkles. What are all those sprinkles from?
The donut.
The donut that someone threw. Yes.
The giant donut.
So I like the way you did that. You're picturing a donut was chucked at the squirrel, and you're thinking like, where could sprinkles come from? Sprinkles. Oh, donuts have sprinkles. I was thinking an old-fashioned donut.
Oh.
They're kind of like boring and dry. They're the kind you dunk into your coffee
Oh.
or milk.
My dad
But
made me make
then when I saw all those sprinkles, I'm like, where would those sprinkles come from? Oh, a donut with frosting on it and sprinkles. You are very quick at thinking of that picture. And then he is knocked out. Sprinkles. Well, I hope somebody saves his life. Chapter 33. Does rabies itch? What? Does rabies itch? His eyes were closed. His head was bleeding. Flora knew that from terrible things can happen to you, that head wounds bleed excessively, whether they are bad or not. All head wounds bleed excessively, she said to her father. Don't panic. Okay, use this, he said. And he handed her his tie. Flora knelt down. She had a very powerful sense of deja vu. It was as if yesterday she had bent over the body of an unknown squirrel in Tootie's backyard. Oh, it was. It was just yesterday. Ulysses, she said, and she dabbed the blood with the tie. The squirrel didn't open his eyes. An eerie quiet descended. The whole of the giant donut became preternaturally calm. Everything, the donuts, the squirrel, her father, seemed to be holding its breath. Why is everybody holding their breath? Why is everybody at the donut shop holding their breath? What do you think, Hayden?
Because Ulysses didn't open her eyes, and they might think she was dead.
Right, they just saw all this crazy commotion. Thank you. They saw all this crazy commotion, and then now they see a squirrel with a little blood on his head, and they know head wounds bleed excessively.
What happened to you?
Good question. Is he okay? Da, da, da.
That's extremely dangerous too.
Flora knew what was happening. She had read about it in Terrible Things Can Happen to You. It was the calm before the storm. The air becomes still. The birds stop singing. The world waits. And then the storm comes out. Inside the giant donut, there was a moment of deep quiet, and they collectively held their breath. And then someone said, I think it was a rat. But it was flying, said another voice. It was in my hair, said Rita. The cook shouted, I'm going to call the cops. That's what I'm going to do. What would the police do about an animal being inside? A small animal, but they don't know it's not dead, right? Like, it's not dead. We don't think it's dead because we still have half the book to go.
They think there's a dead pig. They think there's a dead squirrel in the kitchen.
A dead rat. In the kitchen? Or in the restaurant. Rita was right behind him. Forget about the cops, Ernie. Call the ambulance. I have rabies. I have rabies in my hair.
No, you don't.
You, said Ernie. He pointed at Flora with his knife. You tripped me. Let's get a knife. I have one right here. Not really. You! You tripped me.
I'm gonna die.
No!
Miss Pelly, your scissors.
Sorry. It was what I had.
You were holding it the right way, at least.
That's her, said Rita. She's the one. Plus, she brought that thing in here in the first place, dressed up like a baby doll. I did not, said Flora. Dress him up like a baby doll, and it's your fault. The criminal element said that sometimes it was wise to put the criminals on the defensive by making slanderous or blatantly untrue comments. The surprising unfairness of the tactic will often stop criminals in their tracks. It seemed to work. Rita blinked, opened her mouth, and closed it again. My fault? She said. Flora bent over Ulysses and put a finger on his chest. She felt his heart beating in a slow, thoughtful way. Gratitude and relief washed over her. It was her own heart, which had been beating much too quickly, had slowed inside her chest. It answered the squirrel's heart with its own measure. The Ulysses. Her heart seemed to be saying, Ulysses. I am calling the cops, said Ernie. George Buckman, how do you do, said Flora's father. Is there any reason to call the cops? Well, for one, it was in my hair, said Rita. Do you think that the police should be notified of a squirrel in your hair, said Flora's father. The idiocy of the question, its unsettling logic, made Flora suddenly grateful for her father. Remember, he's like this depressed, sad man ever since the mother said, I want to write books instead of be married to you.
What? She said that?
She wanted to be, well, basically. I think I can feel a rabies coming on. My stomach itches. Does rabies itch, said Flora's father. I'm going to call somebody. She tripped me. What a tattletale.
I know. He's like,
Whom do you think it would be wise to call in the matter of tripping, said Flora's father. He opened the door. He gestured to Flora to walk through it, and she did. The floor swung shut behind them. Run, said her father. And they both began to run. At some point, Flora's father started to laugh. It wasn't a ha-ha-ha kind of laugh. It was a whee-wee kind of laugh. Hysteria, thought Flora. My father has
yeah.
hysteria. She did not just try to distract me with a double flavor cookie. I'm not looking.
Oreo cracker. Not to.
She knew what to do for hysteria. Her father needed to be slapped. Unfortunately, there wasn't time right now. They had to make a getaway. Her father laughed all the way to the car. He laughed when they were in the car. He laughed as he placed his hand at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and he laughed as he backed out of the parking lot and drove away from the giant donut.
Stop laughing.
He stopped laughing only once, long enough for him to shout, Holy Bagumba, the voice of Dolores, the parakeet. And then he went back to laughing. So it sounds like Flora is getting her father back. It sounds like he hasn't laughed or said anything from the old story that they used to read for a long, long time. Chapter 34, The Getaway. So what I want to know is, did they remember the shoebox? Did they remember? Now pick it up. Did they remember the shoebox? Did they remember the squirrel? Because remember, it was passed out and bleeding with sprinkles. The Getaway. They were making their getaway, but they were making their getaway slowly, because even when Flora's father was thinking that things were hilarious, even when he was talking like a parakeet, he still apparently did not believe in speeding. Flora kept looking behind them to see if they were being followed by the cops, or by Rita, or by Ernie. When she finally looked down at Ulysses, his eyes were still closed, and a terrible thought had occurred to her. So, yeah, it didn't say she grabbed him, but now we can tell she grabbed him. She didn't leave him behind, of course. What if he has a concussion, she said to her father. Her father, of course, laughed. Flora tried to remember that terrible things can happen to you said about concussions. There was something about making the person with the head injury speak a favorite nursery rhyme, so the speech patterns, slurring, etc., could be evaluated. Flora stared at the squirrel. He couldn't speak. Also, she doubted he knew any nursery rhymes. There was a very small cut on his head, but the bleeding had stopped, and he was breathing softly and regularly. Ulysses, she said. And then she remembered in its entirety an ominous sentence from Terrible Things Could Happen to You. It's absolutely imperative that you keep the potentially concussed patient awake at all times. She shook the squirrel gently. His eyes stayed closed. She shook the squirrel harder, and he opened the eyes and then closed them again. Flora's heart thudded once and then dropped all the way down to her toes. Does her heart really drop?
Nope.
What does the author mean when she says her heart dropped to her toes? What do you think, Mr. Messiah? Can you feel it? Did your heart drop to your toes ever?
No.
What do you think, Kennedy?
I think she's like really sad, and she hopes he's not dead, and
So sad is an emotion.
she probably is gonna give her CPR again.
Ah, get ready. So sad is an emotion. Your heart changes based on your emotions. If you're excited, your heart goes. If you're sad, your heart goes. Yes. Can you sit on your bottom? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Flora's heart thudded once and then dropped all the way down to her toes. She was suddenly terrified. Do superheroes die? She said out loud.
Yes.
Her father stopped laughing. Listen, he said, we won't let him die. Aww, she could have some faith in her dad. Flora's heart thudded again. It was a different kind of thud. It wasn't fear. It was
Happiness.
hope. But for Flora, that's like the same thing. Because she's a cynic, remember? Does that mean you won't try to hit him over the head with a shovel? I won't, said her father. Ever? Ever. Do you promise? I promise. Her father looked at her in the rearview mirror. Flora looked back. Let's go to your place then, she said. He'll be safe there. At these words, George Buckman started laughing hysterically again. Very good. I can't wait to see how the father saves his life. I can't wait to see what happens at the father's house. And why is he hysterically laughing?